Hi, welcome to another episode of Inner World Odysseys. Today we have special guest Lori Marie, who is an astrologer, healer, mindful art teacher, and also a podcaster. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've been super excited.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I've listened to a few of your podcasts and have an interest in the things you talk about with spirituality and astronomy and those type of things. Where do you see yourself in terms of self-identification of what do you most identify with is your role?
Um, Sort of I want to say a gardener of sorts, a gardener of consciousness. I like to plant seeds and help people kind of wake up on their own. And my ultimate guide is to guide people. My ultimate goal is to guide people towards self-awareness. And
Hmm.
as they start to delve into knowing themselves a little bit better, then other things start to awaken. They start to have more aha moments. They start to realize what's really happening. They feel a little more grounded and a little more present. And that I feel like is the very first step in understanding what we're really doing here in this human experience. I think prior to that, we just kind of like live, sleep, eat, breathe, reach our goals, happy, sad, all of that. But we never quite understand what's really happening. But I don't
Hmm.
think we really can until we delve into, both our light and dark sides of ourselves.
Wow. Yeah, that's so important to get to know ourselves. And that's really what the podcast is about, getting to know people more deeply and who they are as individuals. And so I wanted to ask, what shapes your perspective in life? Like, what affects how you see the world?
Um, well, I used to think the outside world affected me. I used to think that, the way everybody else was and everything that was going on outside affected me. But really what I'm learning is that me who I am on the inside is creating what's happening on the outside. So I think that it's kind of like the world and our reality is like a projection of our inner world. So when I see things in the outer world happening and they're molding me, really what's happening is I'm just projecting and telling myself on some level, you know, become aware of what's happening in this moment. Why when this car cuts me off am I so irritated? Like
Mm.
it's not that car's fault. I have a choice in my response. So I really think that I'm molding myself unconsciously to learn to look at the world from healthier perspectives, if that makes
Hmm.
any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely relate to that in terms of how our inner world shapes what we feel we see in the world. And like from listening to different spiritual podcasts, including yours, feel like the sense of you can kind of tell what's true by the vibe of it. And there's so much coming at us in the world, so much information that people try to prove if their beliefs are true or not. But really, we kind of have an innate sense of what is true and the fact that that comes in at us. I think you mentioned once about channeling information, and that's something that's really interesting to me. How we could channel information, and instead of having to learn something from a book or from online, we can just kind of feel something is true, and that's what can help us get ahead.
I kind of believe that literally and not even figuratively, literally all energy is channeled information from source. And being that we all are source, we're channeling that information into our human selves. I almost feel like this human body really messes up what's really happening, and that's where we get messed up. But really, this human body is sort of like a conduit, and we're sitting here. And if we can turn off the mind for a minute and open ourselves up to that energy that's coming in, and listen to not what we hear, but listen to what we feel when we channel that source energy, or when sometimes we're not even aware that we're channeling. It's just we're allowing information to come through, and we flow with it. We don't let our mind fight us against it. We do that when we write books. We do that when we create art. We do that when we create conversation. When we come up with like quotes, that like fit well with us, and we just kind of say it. And, that quote is now like an energy source that other people go to, and they get their own aha moment from their own perspective. And so like for you to say, you're interested in channeled information, and not necessarily from other sources. I kind of feel like we need to hear it from other sources to wake ourselves up to knowing that we're channeling, to knowing that we're just receiving information. Otherwise we'll stay asleep. And, so it's kind of like turning on our own radio waves, and listening, and everybody, they go back to like the Buddha, and they go back to like other sources of like what meditation is stereotypically, and really because we do need to quiet our mind and quiet our soul, but it doesn't have to be in the sense of the way the Buddha said. It has to be more along the sense of doing something that allows us to turn our brain off and flow. So it could be taking a walk in nature, and we're doing something. We're not sitting there in meditation we're walking through nature, but we tuned out everything else, and we are energetically tapping into nature around us. And nature is the perfect tool for us to get in touch with source and channel information. I mean, look at artists. They love to go to nature to create art, or writers. They love to go sit in nature and get inspiration. And it's because it's the closest thing you'll get to source and away from our brain.
Wow. Yeah, that's so well spoken. I've heard that a lot too, about how artists channel things. They don't take credit for sitting and thinking and coming up with something brilliant. It comes to them, which means it comes from somewhere else. And I find also with the meditation practices, I enjoy walking in the forest and doing things outside, and chopping wood is like meditative, or any repetitive physical action that I don't have to think so much, just taking a walk. And that's really valuable for me as someone who has a lot of busy thoughts in my mind, to start to get into a more peaceful place.
Yeah, you use nature and walks, but I mean, let's look at other successful people. I mean, we have athletes who get into a zone, and they tap into that like space, and they channel that like energetic energy into them that allows them to reach their highest potential. Or even actors and actresses, or musicians, people that we look to as successful or magnetic. Even like people that tend to be magnetic, it's not because there's anything special about them. It's because they're tuned into their authenticity, and they're tuned into channeling, and not always conscious, mostly not conscious, but that's where that creativity stems from. I listened to a really awesome podcast the other day, where the guest, his name was Vinny, and he had a near-death experience. And he talks about his near-death experience, and he's on the other side. But at the very end, he said something that really like struck me, and kind of goes along with what we're talking about. He said he saw the future. He's like, and what I seen in the future was that everybody had communities where they lived in like tribes that they vibed with in sacred energetic places on the planet, not necessarily like big cities and hustle bustle, but they all just kind of gravitated to where they energetically felt. And he's like, and it was not about consuming. It had nothing to do with consuming. It had nothing to do with like, consumerism. He's like, it turned into creativity, and everything everybody was doing, they were creating. And because they were in these sacred places, they were creating from source in their where they naturally vibrated with. And that makes so much sense, because when we are in touch with that place within us, we flow and we don't fight against it, and we turn off our brain, and we think we're writing a book, we think we're writing a song, we think we're writing a poem, but we're not. We're channeling source, we're channeling that creativeness. And so when we're in touch, like, it's about creating. We're not thinking about eating the next donut at the most famous shop on the corner. We're thinking about, wow, that donut looks so cool. Look how like the colors are matching. Oh, I want to recreate that. And then we get the paint out and we like channel that feeling it gave us. Again, it had nothing to do with consuming it. It had everything to do with the way it made us feel.
Yeah, I recently saw this film about Vincent van Gogh and about how he wanted his paintings to encompass his experiences of nature. And he felt so strongly about capturing how he saw nature in a beautiful, unique way, because he felt other people couldn't see it that way. And I think that's kind of what the purpose of each of our individualness is we see things all differently. And if we can show people the beauty of what we see, then we can invite them into what we experience, and that is valuable for everyone.
It is. It really, really is. You know how when you listen to somebody else's perspective, you might relate or you might not relate, or when you read a book, you might relate, or watch a movie. And sometimes, and I don't know if you've had conversations like this, but I've had conversations with people where they're sharing their story, and I feel so connected to that story, almost as if I lived it too, right? And the same with like books that I've read. I get sucked into the book as if I'm living the experience. And then movies, of course, movies magically do that because it adds visualization and sound and emotion, right? But if we think about it, when somebody else is sharing their channeled perspective and we get the opportunity, like you said, to experience it, it within itself creates a whole new energy, because now we have a perspective and now we've experienced. So we really are living and feeling and breathing that other person's perspective when we allow ourselves to be open to accepting it. I mean, look at our society. We're so separated. But if we could start allowing ourselves to, listen and feel and hear other people's perspective, we will start to embrace and understand and be a part of it and be more connected, because that's exactly what our society needs. We need more connection in order to, evolve as a planet.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel that with technology, we're becoming more disconnected because of everything's become political and separate. And the real truth is, like, we're all connected as a species, as one big species. We're one thing. And to have that realization, we should be asking more kinds of questions like, where is our species going, and what are we doing to improve our consciousness as a species? And I think I've heard in spiritual conversations from your podcast and others about how we're at a point where there's this ascension of consciousness, and a lot of people around the world are having this same realization that we're going to another level of realizing that we're not separate and we're all kind of connected, and the possibilities that implied in that. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, if you allow yourself to see, yeah, the patterns, you you see those patterns are happening. Like, for some people they happened a long time ago and they're more rapid now, and for other people they're just starting. Have Did you ever watch the movie? It's from like, I would say like 2005, called "What the Bleep Do You Know?"
No, I don't think so.
It's a really good movie to look up. It's called What the Bleep Do You Know? And I recommend it for anybody who's starting on their path of realization, awakening, their consciousness to like what's really going on. But in it made a really good analogy about how native islanders lived on an island and ships would pass by, but they'd never seen a ship before, so they didn't see it because it never existed in their reality. And so, how sometimes when you see a new car or you're interested in a new type of car and you've never seen it, I've never seen this car. This is a really cool car. But then suddenly when you're driving, you see that same car everywhere. And it just magically it's because it was brought to your awareness. So it's kind of like that in the sense that, the work that you're doing and the work I'm doing and the work that people are starting to wake up are doing is really just saying it. And we're creating these patterns. And as so you see 111 on the clock, people, turned it into it's making a wish. But really all it is your inner self waking you up. You're seeing a new pattern, and eventually you're going to see other things that start waking you up too, and you're going to start seeing the connections, and you're going to start realizing, somebody else is in control, but really I have complete control. Like I have free will. And what it boils down to is changing our perspective, seeing things that have always been there, but our conditioned mind didn't allow us to see it.
Yeah, like noticing patterns that we weren't aware of because we didn't know to recognize them. And that's kind of like in the movie The Matrix, where there's these strange things happening that people don't understand the significance of until they shift their perspective from that this is the real world to we're in some kind of illusion and the real world is more significant and we can control it. And that's, I think, an analogy for life and how we're more powerful than we make ourselves believe or that we're being told. And I think that's the real power of becoming aware of things and conscious, is that we start to realize that we can do a lot more than we think we can.
But it has to be within a partnership. And that's the message I've been getting over the last few years. And here's what I mean by partnership. So like we are all connected through source. And there's many words that source comes from: God, the universe, Allah, Buddha, whatever. But source is that divine energy that runs through everything and connects us and is what we are. And so with that, we have to realize that, I lost my perspective. Sorry. The channeled energy, the perspective. Oh my gosh, I do this all the time, especially when I have a thought. I must not be tapped into the right way to say it yet. Could you reiterate for me, and maybe we could edit this part out, what you were stating in regards to, the Matrix. Okay, there we go. So the Matrix is more of a way people have learned to come to the assumption that we live in a matrix, that we live in like a simulated world and, break out of the matrix, right? But really what's happening is the matrix is a simulation. But what is a simulation of is our consciousness. Our consciousness, like Avatar, is in a reality that's playing out in front of us. And that's why I say everything's a projection, right? But if you want to get super deep, we're so connected that we've all lived every reality and every person. I've been you, you've been me, I've been the frog, I've been the speck of dust, I've been the molecule. And that's why when, for example, people that say they passed over, they feel everything and they feel like they know everything and they feel like they've experienced everything, and all the people they see they feel connected to as if it's themselves. And it's because that's what it is. That the matrix is what you and I are looking at right now. The matrix is the game we play in order to remember who we are and where we come from. Does that make sense? So we're not being controlled in a video game by an elite forcing us to, and we're trying to break out of it. What we're doing is we're living in a conditioned way that our brain works. Our brain is our matrix. What we need to just wake up to our consciousness, to who we really are.
Yeah, I've heard something kind of like that before that was pretty mind-blowing to me, and it made me think about how I often have this sense that I've lived many lives before, and it feels strange that I'm here in this body and I don't really feel connected to the limits of life, and thinking I have one life and I'm going to die and then something else happens. I kind of have the sense that things keep going and you keep experiencing different lives, because if the purpose of life is to learn, then there would be no point to live just one life, and whatever you learn is just that's it, because there would be such limitations to that purpose.
Some of my aha moments came from a very everyday lady. Her name is Dolores Cannon, and when I learned about her story and where she came from, she was a nurse, and her husband was into a car accident, and so she had to stay home and take care of him, and she got into hypnosis, and she developed a system called quantum hypnosis. And basically, it takes you into the absolute deepest state of mind. And in that state, you channel source, you channel various lives. And until now, I always thought they're channeling of their own. But really, what they're channeling when they get into that state of mind is an awareness. They woke up for a minute, and another awareness that they're relating to. And so one of them, when you're in that state and you're trying to also relay it through a 3D reality, it's hard to find the right words sometimes, right? So there's this one section in one of the books where she's giving a session with one of her clients, and they're describing, what turns out to be them blowing through the air. And, it took a really long time to explain, because here she was in a 3D reality asking the questions, but really what's happening wasn't really super explainable. And so we realized that that they were consciousness blowing through the wind. They didn't have a body. They didn't have like an identity, and they were explaining what it felt like and what it looked like. And, and then another was a rock. They explained just existing in the consciousness of a rock. And I'm like, so really what's happening is that we're able to, as humans, live from a multidimensional reality, whereas some other ways our consciousness exists, we're a little stoic and we're not maybe able to explore the other realms. But then there was stories where they were aware in other realities, in other worlds. And so, we're so limited by time and space, and this awareness, this matrix that our mind exists in, that we have to break out of that matrix in order to understand we are just consciousness. We are just consciousness experiencing this human reality. But really, if we shift our consciousness a little bit, guess what? Now we're in another realm. And that's why people that are like mentally ill or schizophrenic are, they can't exist in this reality very well, because they're aware of multi-dimensional awarenesses at the same time. They are hearing voices. They're not making that up. They're just channeling it from other sources. And in this 3D reality, it's not easy to exist like that.
Yeah, and like that's a profound thought. Like I have mental illness and felt like that. And I feel like if I told a clinical psychologist about that, they would say that's a big problem of dissociation or dissociative disorder.
Right.
But to me, I've maintained that there's something to it. And if I can sense things that are in the air or that I can't explain, that's something real. It's not something in my head that's wrong. It's just my human body's ability to process the information is not there.
Process. Use keyword is process. We can't always process with this human self very easily.
Yeah, especially me, just processing day-to-day conversations in general. I feel like as someone with autism and ADHD, I have, like, from conversations like this or with anyone, I feel so much information come at me, like
Yeah.
facial expressions, emotions, tones, and it takes me time to put it all together to know what it all means. There's so much there, and like I think it's all valuable information, so I want to give it the care and time it takes to think about what everything means.
Well,
So
you want to
sometimes,
process it. You want to process it so
yeah,
that you could articulate it. And my daughter she is a high functioning autistic child, but she has sensory processing disorder. So she feels, sees, smells, touch, tastes everything at a hyper level, and it doesn't process well in this world that needs you to be grounded.
yeah, and I think there's value in being sensitive to things because of the awareness of what value that has. And like if I'm in a place where there's a lot of chaos and people feel have the nervous energies, I'm picking up on that and getting the overwhelm and feeling like I can't talk or move. And there's some value to being aware of that because it's not normal to be in certain states. Like if someone's really angry or upset or in a bad state, I internalize that and I start thinking, well, how could this person be helped because they're not doing well? And that's a lot to take on. So I start thinking, but really it's
Well,
something
it's
that
autism
affects
is
me.
is almost a form of um, well, it is a form of like being empathic or in tune with things that other people aren't in tune with. But here's the thing: being autistic, I feel like on some level everybody is autistic. Everybody is very similar, but some of them have the hyper tuned in function of it and they cannot deal with reality very, very well. So, like myself included, and person that maybe isn't awake included, they'll go into Walmart and then they'll come out and they'll be highly anxious and they'll be so stressed out, and they have their bread and their milk in their cart and they suddenly needed to leave, but they have no idea why. Nothing isolated happened, and they get in their car and then they decompress and then they go about their day. Or they don't and they hold on to that energy and then it physically affects them. And it's because they're not self-aware to realize what really happened. So autism is just a label. It's just that you're at a different functioning level of perception and filtering what's going through the 3D consciousness. So there's really nothing wrong with you, and there's really nothing wrong with my child. There's really nothing wrong with that lady that was in the grocery store. What is wrong is that our society needs to label things in order to understand them and put them into categories to understand them. And that's not how understanding works. That's how the English or the verbal language works. We see pictures and we have to associate them with the labels so that we can remember and put them in a comfortable little box.
Yeah, and I feel that like in our society we like sort people out and say you're this, you're that, and even with the conversation with binaries and people saying you have to be either a man or a woman, and I say, well, in the plant world there are plants that are both, and so I don't see how there could be something that's always in one or the other box. And I think it's just laziness in terms of people saying, oh, well, we're only going to make two things, men and women clothes and men and women bathrooms, and they don't want to cater to people who don't feel like one or the other. And the same with mental illness. They want to put
Put a
everyone
label.
in. Yeah, like everyone with autism is so varied and has such different experiences, and you can't just say, okay, this will help people with autism. You have to get to know each person individually and what they need. And that's hard to do, but that's valuable for society to look at what individuals need and to try to provide for them.
Oh, and over time, as you know, because the step that we're on right now, you and me, and a lot of other podcasters, people that want to get information out, spiritual healers and other, just advocates in general. What the work we're doing right now is just the first step, and that step is to waking people up to what's really happening. But that next step goes to how the universe, like the universal, we have English, we have Spanish, we have, sign language, we have all these different languages, but the next step will be having a universal language that maybe doesn't even have words. And the reason for that is because the way things feel are what's real and what's authentic. But once we put a word or a label onto something, it can become jaded over time, lose its meaning, change its form, and not be what it initially was. When we look at English language, it changes into slang depending on culturally where you're at or whatnot. And with other cultures, they have the same, But so what we need is not to have words that are limiting, and we need to start feeling and expressing through music, expressing through facial expressions, expressing through touch, and eliminate these labels and these boxes where we feel comfortable. Because if we didn't have words and something didn't feel right, everybody would just turn around and go the other direction. They wouldn't want to entertain it.
Yeah, I love that idea of a universal language that's beyond something pre-constructed. Like, it's true, like things take on different connotations in different languages, like how in the book 1984, they show how language can be used as a weapon to obscure meaning, and how the philosopher Wittgenstein said, the limits of my language are the limits of my mind. And that kind of shows how
That's big.
if we
That's a
yeah,
big
it's
one,
the
yeah.
same concept. If we can't express or articulate a certain idea, then we can't imagine it. So it's shaped.
But we can imagine so much more than our words can explain. When people go through spiritual experiences that are like, there aren't words to describe it, it's because there's feelings and emotions and experience that to be had out there that don't have words, because words are too limited. Language is limiting. Like, the only thing that's real and truly authentic is the way something feels. And so we'll need some sort of, think about it. They talk about how aliens don't use words, right? They don't need words. They use thought. And thought, we at this stage will use thought in a word form. So if I say a word to you, you put a picture into your head. You'll either see the word or you'll see a picture that you relate the word to, right? But other species, other beings, they don't need that. They just kind of almost have that hive mind where they all sort of kind of know what the other is feeling, thinking. And we need to get our planet to eventually ascend to the level where we eliminate the limiting experience of words.
Yeah, and I see it as just an efficiency, because as someone with a processing disorder, it takes me so much energy to take in the verbal of what someone says, convert it into something in my mind, and then convert my thoughts then into talking, and it doesn't come out exactly how I want. And if there was a direct way to communicate that's not going through all these filters, like I'm learning a language on this app, Duolingo, and I learned only a few words. So if I go and try to speak Russian, with the few words I learned, I'm going to sound like a baby because I only know a few ways to express myself.
Yep.
And so in terms of all the languages in the world, like now that there's technology able to quickly convert languages so we can understand each other, it will speed up the way that we can connect with each other, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I say what I'm doing is planting seeds, because right now I'm just talking from my perspective, from the channeled source information I get, right? And I'm saying it, and many people might hear it, maybe only a few people hear it, but it doesn't really matter, because somewhere they hear it, and they're creating a visual thought to it, and they're relating to it in the way they hand. And if they can't relate it to right now, they're going to put it back, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's still there. They still heard it. But then they'll do something one day, or they'll see something one day, and they'll have an aha moment, and they'll be like, this makes sense. But it made sense because these little minute patterns came from different areas. It stimulated the brain and it stayed there. And then that aha moment brought all those little planted seeds together and blossomed. And so really, because that's how we process in this stage of evolution, that's the only thing we could really do, is just the people that know how to live from a place of authenticity. It doesn't matter how you process. If you are living from a very authentic place where you are just going about doing what feels right, living from a healthy, positive perspective as much as you can, because we're human, those patterns will eventually build up and eventually will ascend. But it won't happen overnight. Lots of dark shadows have to be looked at first. And at some point, the accumulation of people. I mean, look, more and more people have podcasts every day. Why is that? Because everybody has something they want to say. You know what I mean? Everybody has a valuable insight. Everybody has a valuable perspective. And eventually all of our perspectives and all of our little brains are going to have this one big explosive aha moment, and we'll just suddenly shift. And that's why our planet seems like we're ascending so much quicker all the time. It's because we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how when I listen to your podcast, I just had that feeling that this feels good, this feels true, and having that inspires me to seek after things like that instead of a lot of content that's just very watered down or trying to be hyped up or get attention, and you feel empty after it. It's kind of like eating a lot of sugar and you don't feel satiated. You just
Yep.
feel unpleasant. And I really want nourishing conversations and nourishing information to feel better, because we're in a society now where you can so easily consume and consume, but it's not going to make us feel good if it's
No.
not the right thing.
It's so funny. America is kind of the one that started this, the American dream, and everybody we're trying to go after the best thing and living the best life and being the best this and the best that. And with that comes competition, and with competition comes, more categories of what's good and what's bad, and what's and all we did as a society is create more limitedness, when really we live on what we thought was freedom, right? And then other countries are looking from the outside, looking into our country, and they want to live that dream too, because in their country they have all these restrictions, but it's just a big facade. Really, the goal is to just live from the most authentic perspective. Help people. Care for people. Don't walk past somebody on the street that fell over. Ask them if they're okay. Help them up. If they don't need it, then, go about your business. But the point is live a life that you're proud of. And when you start living from that perspective, things like you're saying, conversations that mean something feel so much better. After I do a reading, or after I'm on a podcast, or after I have a really good conversation, I feel high. I feel like I'm on drugs. And I don't want that feeling to go away, but it's because I channeled natural source energy with other people that were doing the exact same thing from a really, good place. And that is what real life feels like, not the crap that, you get a dopamine hit and you move on, not that. That's fake, and it'll lead you there eventually, because you'll decide that you don't like it and it's not enough. Like you said, when you eat a piece of sugar, you get a pleasure for 1 minute, but you feel crappy after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
So
experienced that a lot. I'm becoming aware of my dopamine addiction and trying to step away from social media scrolling and being so uh, getting so much interaction on screens and so much popping up and hype things. And I realize, like, after that, I just feel exhausted. I don't feel good. I'm like, oh, I went through a whirlwind of looking at things online, and now I'm just tired and my brain is fried.
I want to comment that really quick though. So it's about perspective. So here's how you change that, okay? So when you do go through, let's just say you're going through social media and you're flowing through it and you're getting your dopamine hits, like it's sparking a thought, you're sparking a thought there. But really, if we change that tool into a different perspective, one where it triggers creativity, where it triggers wanting to explore knowledge in a different area. So for me, what I've gotten out of, for example, TikTok, is I've learned from so many health practitioners out there that speak about things that I knew nothing of. And so they're triggering these thoughts in my head in their quick little 30, 60-second, thing. Oh, wow. And they make me think about myself and about, well, I can relate to that. And then I dig deeper. And then I've gotten so many books on different topics that I've learned from, certain people talking about things that I've never heard of before that make complete sense. Like I feel like I had my own little self-help right in my hand. But if you're just going through it to go through it, to shut your brain off, then that is sort of an addiction within itself. But if you're doing it because you're getting something positive out of it and it's shifting you into a type of awareness, that's a whole different perspective. So really with anything, and I say this to you because you seem to be a fairly authentic person who wants a deep experience in life. Literally the next time, and try this today, the next time you have an experience that wasn't satisfying or left you unsatisfied, take 10 seconds and change your perspective. Because in that very moment that you became aware that you weren't satisfied, you opened up the opportunity of self-awareness. Why didn't I feel that way? Why did it make, and what can I learn from this experience? Oh, I could do this instead. Or maybe, maybe you could even look into the psychology behind the person that created that content or made that food, maybe that sugar didn't give you the satisfaction you needed, but she maybe changed the perspective into the person that made it. They put their heart and soul into it to put all the right ingredients, to make it as healthy as possible, because some people just love sweets and even if they're not healthy for you, so they're going to put the healthy ingredients in. So really everything boils down to our perspective. And if we don't like what we see and we don't like how we feel, then that's a moment to become aware. And that's a moment that we can shift our perspective.
Yeah, and that's what I've been working on recently, is being aware. And like now I'm keeping journals of what I'm spending my time on. And like today I was doing a lot more productive things instead of just getting distracted by stuff. I was listening to podcasts that are interesting. I was going on a walk. I was watching shows that I could learn something from. And I feel a lot more calm, and that's what I want to feel. So
Yeah.
it's hard to come down from an addiction, just like with drug addiction. I used to be smoking a lot of weed all the time, and it made me feel good. But then the last few months I quit, and to come off of that, it's a hard shift because you're used to feeling stimulated all the time. And to change your brain pattern from that constant stimulation to getting smaller hits of dopamine and doing things that are healthier ways to get that dopamine is like a, a healthier process. And I see it as like weaning off of that dopamine addiction from, like, let's say watching a lot of shows online and stuff, and then now I'm more aware and trying to take things in smaller bits.
It's because, you said earlier, you just want to be calmer. You just want to feel calmer and less stimulated or overstimulated, because that's a good safe feeling, right? But what we need to do is we need to feel the overstimulation and we need to feel the calmness. We need that contrast. And then what we need to learn to do is know that any way there is to it, the one thing that we have no control over is change, and we won't always feel calm. And so what we need to learn how to do so that we don't chase after those dopamine hits or those addictions is we need to learn how to be uncomfortable. We need to learn how to be comfortable, uncomfortable. And the reason is because if we always need to relieve ourselves of how we're feeling, we're not going to learn anything. If we have a pain and we run to the ibuprofen, if we have a rough day and we grab a drink after work because it's going to calm us down, we need to learn to decompress without having to find a way to decompress. Go sit on your couch, grab a glass of water, open a book, turn on quiet music, find a different way to decompress instead of reaching after something that's going to help you. And you know what? You might not even feel good for an hour, 2 hours. You might not feel good until you wake up the next morning. But what you did is that you allowed your body to process that uncomfortable feeling. And the next time you start to have that uncomfortable feeling from whatever created the experience, you'll know to choose a different path. But you learned that because you allowed yourself to make the mistake. You allowed yourself to feel it. But when we don't allow ourselves to feel things, then we get addictions, and then we don't learn. We don't rewire our brain. So, the ultimate lesson really is that we need to learn to be comfortable, uncomfortable, because that's how we learn and grow and ascend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just how addiction is kind of just repeating the same mistake over and over by going back to the wrong way of dealing with something, which it then teaches us that lesson again and again. So I think it comes back to what we're saying, consciousness and awareness is where we start to grow, because once we're aware, then we can say, oh, I keep doing this, which leads me to not feeling good, and then leads me to do this again. And we can always break out of that as soon as we're aware. Yeah. That's what I've learned from listening to meditations and things that have a lot of knowledge that I believe also is channeled, because they seem to be speaking extemporaneously and it just flows and feels true and helps a lot of people. So it's kind of hard to dismiss that kind of knowledge that affects everyone in the same way. Everyone always comes back to how meditation is valuable for so many reasons. And so I think...
you could be in meditation and be in pain. You could literally be in the worst mood. You could just had a bad day at work, and then you had to fight the traffic, which only domino affected. And then you come home and you sit on your couch and you're like, I need to meditate, but you don't really need to do anything. You literally just need to sit and allow yourself to feel everything you felt. And if you allow that, then it will dissipate on its own. You allowed it to process and flow through you. That's meditation. Meditation doesn't have to be, what everybody thinks it is. Meditation is when you allow yourself to sit, feel, and become aware of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that moment may be.
Because the idea, like we said with words, that the word meditation has become co-opted, and even some people who do these practices that get us into that state don't like to use the word meditation because of that, and how also some spiritualists don't like the word God because it means different things to different people. But the core of it is very valuable to everyone, and I think there's value for sure in realizing that we're all connected, and that being mindful and not having a busy mind and channeling things is a way to be happy and be at peace. And however we articulate that is a valuable path. There's so many different meditations that lead to the same result with different ways.
And we have to realize too, sometimes we just are going to have a busy mind. And that's okay. And sometimes we just are going to have a bad day, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with it. It needed to happen for whatever reason, and you need to become aware. And that's the point. So if you're noticing you're in the middle of a bad moment, a bad feeling, you became aware. And that is half the battle. That's half the battle. And then if you realize that you're having a busy mind, well, then that's half the battle. You just became aware of it. So what are you going to do about it? Divert your thoughts to maybe more pleasant ones. Thinking of nothingness is only going to make you think of the same thing more and more and more, right? So that nothingness doesn't really work, but you can divert yourself to a more pleasant, okay, you know what, my mind is tossing and turning and it's not doing me any good. And my advice to people is, when you catch yourself thinking and overthinking and you can't make a decision, or something's just bothering you and you feel like you're just tossing it over and over, then that means that you're disconnected from yourself and that you're not aware. That means you're thinking. That means you're not in touch with your intuition. You're not in touch with yourself. And the way I've learned to become in my flow state, which it's really uncanny on how the different ways that I am divinely on time. Like, it happens so much that my daughter and I laugh every time it happens. But I will walk in a room when a timer goes off, or I will literally sit up when my alarm goes off, before it goes off, or like, timing is it's just, when you are in allowing a flow state and allowing life to be what it is, things naturally start to unfold. But how you get there is by listening to the way something feels. So if it doesn't feel right, then if you don't get like a hell yes or a yeah, then it wasn't right. If you feel an indecisiveness about something, then come back to it later. Don't answer it in the moment, and when you're driving and you don't know like where you want to eat, well, then maybe it's not time to eat yet. Maybe you need to just grab a drink of water and do something different, and then let it come to you. Oh, and then as you're on your way to get a drink of water, you see a restaurant you forgot all about, and let's go eat there, but you didn't allow the overthinking, and you didn't settle on something that didn't feel right. You know what I mean? And it's same with people in our lives. If they don't feel right, it's okay to let them go. And if they're meant to be there, they'll come back around when your energies match again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I feel a lot of this tumultuousness throughout life about feeling I should do this or I'm pressured to do that. And it never feels right, and it makes it hard to proceed.
Yep.
And for someone like me, it takes a long time to decide. I've been more recently just letting myself take that time to decide, even if it takes me an hour to decide what I want to eat or what I want to do. It's better than pushing myself to do what I feel I should do, and then I don't feel good because it wasn't what I felt.
Or what you could do, because, sometimes you think, because I don't believe we should go with the shoulds. I should call them. I haven't talked to them in a long time. I should eat because I haven't eaten yet today. I should go to my neighbor's house because they're probably needing help and it's probably the right thing to do. I should clean my house. When you think I should, then that's when you need to feel, okay, does it feel like I should do that? Or am I telling myself I should do that? Like, am I thinking? And so, like, when it comes to eating, for example, I should eat. Well, does my body telling me I should eat because it's getting anxious and hangry, for a lack of a better word? And then you need to like say, okay, yeah, then I probably really should eat. And you can't decide because maybe you're just a little too hungry, right? And that's when you grab your glass of water and then you walk around and then you open and you let it come to you. Instead of forcing yourself to eat something you don't really want to eat, because then it goes into your body for all the wrong reasons, and then it doesn't, you don't use that energy the right way in your body, and it kind of just, it's unpleasant. It's not needed. But when we listen to our body, and when we listen to and we think, I should, that's when we need to take the awareness and say, I should, because it feels like that's what I should do. It feels right. It feels like, yeah, a yes, a hell yes. I should go. Yeah, you know what? Something's telling me I need to go check on my neighbor, or yeah, my tummy is actually grumbling and I do feel a little moody. Let me just open the fridge and like scan through it and see like what hell yes and you can play a game with it and like, look for the red, the one that stands out the most, and grab that and. But really, we need to get ourselves into a flow state where we're comfortable saying no to things that don't feel right. It is okay to say no. It is okay if you have a messy house because it doesn't feel right to clean it. Like, if you are embarrassed to have people over because your house is messy, then go to them and clean your house when you feel right to clean it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said. And I think that's a natural flow of a conversation. And yeah, maybe we could wrap up here. I'm really happy to have you on the show and to share your expertise and your flow. And I think a lot of people will appreciate what you have to say. And if you could let people know where to find more about you, and I can share it with some people as well.
That'd be awesome. So I wear many hats, but everything, has the same message. If you are looking at the spiritual side of things and you want a reading or a life coach session or a healing session or a metaphysical divination class, you can find me at divine24.org. If you are local in the Arizona East Valley area and you love art, I am starting a art studio called Inner Visions 24, which is basically teaching mindful artness, but mindful artness in the sense that anything you create can be mindful and bring you self-awareness that way. And then finally, we do have a podcast right now, which is new, and I would love, new followers and new guests, to find us. But we do many productions through evolve24.org, and currently Deep Thynker Society is, our current new podcast. And our next podcast, which is going to be alongside Deep Thinkers, is called Wisdom Beyond Time. And we are currently looking for guests. So if there are any guests out there who have had any sort of near-death experience where they gained wisdom outside of time and space, or if they've had any sort of trauma-induced wisdom, or maybe plant medicine ceremony where they have maybe had an ego death, or even worked with a shaman or is a shaman that did shaman journeying, or maybe had out-of-body experience where they gained knowledge and brought it back and they're not quite sure where that information came from. We're looking for guests who want to come on Wisdom Beyond Time, who have had experience and feel comfortable sharing their stories so that that wisdom that they gained outside of time and space can be said and brought out to the world so other people can hear that story too.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, so thanks for sharing your time with me and helping us get to know you better. And I'm sure we'll cross paths again and be able to converse about things that we both enjoy.
That's wonderful. Thank you for having me on, Harrison.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.